Hello and welcome. I am your host of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Author Karen E. Osborne. I have five novels out. The latest is Justice for Emerson. I am so glad that you're here. This is a space for readers and writers to come together and talk about books. I am delighted. Well, first of all, thank you guys for coming back. So glad to see you. I hope that you are a regular and you watch every single week. And I am so happy to introduce you to my guest this week. Her name is Lee Bukowski. Hey, Lee.
Hi, Karen. Good to see you.
It is good to see you. And I want to tell you a little bit about her. So she lives in Reading, Pennsylvania, and where she does teaching and writing, reading. She travels outside of Pennsylvania, especially to visit her grown daughters in Boston and Fort Lauderdale, which is about an hour and a half from me here in Florida. She's also, I love this, she's a self-proclaimed Billy Joel superfan, and she has now seen 50 live concerts of Billy Joel. And she says she's going to last as long as he lasts. She's going to keep it up. I am also a Billy Joel fan, and she has a debut novel, A Week of Warm Weather, that she's going to tell us about. Plus, she's going to tell us about her latest projects. So here we go. So first, let's just get people to understand kind of your journey. So you're a teacher, you're a writer. What was that writing journey that got you to a debut novel?
So I always like to say I'm a recovering seventh grade English teacher. Um, and it sounds horrifying to many people to teach seventh grade, but I really just loved it. And so I had a very satisfying career that I loved, but I also knew that it would not be something that I would be doing forever. I knew that there was something else out there for me. And the idea of writing a book was always very appealing. People ask, and I'm sure they ask you the same thing, did you always want to be a writer? And my answer is, I don't think so. Or if I did, I didn't know it when I was younger. But I got to a point where I really felt like it was a good time for me to transition from teaching to writing. I felt like I had a story to tell. I felt like I had lived enough. I'd had enough life experience to tell the story that I had in mind with some finesse and some authenticity. And so I just really, took the leap and resigned from my teaching position and entered into a creative writing master's program. And that's where I gained a little bit more knowledge in terms of, technique and the different aspects of creative writing. And as the thesis for that program, I wrote the first 30,000 words of A Week of Warm Weather, and it went from there.
It's wonderful. That is awesome. Where did you take the class? The
I did it
course?
online through Southern New Hampshire University, and I really, really liked the program. It was rigorous. It was a lot of work, but I like that. And that's why I actually resigned it. At first, I thought I could teach full time and do that. And then,
Mm.
little things like eating and sleeping and those sorts of things, you can't do it all. So I really just decided to take the leap.
That's wonderful. That is awesome. So tell us the premise of A Week of Warm Weather.
So, A Week of Warm Weather is about a woman named Tessa who has had a trauma in her childhood that she has moved past, but she hasn't really dealt with it. And as we know, those are two different
The
things.
different things.
And so she's moved past it, but as a young adult, a young wife, that trauma is resurrected when her husband begins behaving in a very strange and even dangerous way. And so when she sort of pieces together, what he's doing, how she got here, how she's in this, troubled marriage, she's forced to go back and revisit what happened to her as a child. And it's sort of her journey in figuring out herself and how not only is she going to navigate what's going on, but also she has a child of her own at this point, and it's this idea of trauma. If it's not dealt with, then it becomes generational. And so she really just, it's her journey to figure this out so that it is not passed on to her own children.
So true, isn't it, Lee? That if we don't deal with it, it comes out sideways, comes
Exactly.
out in all kinds of ways. And of course, that affects our children, that affects our relationships. And yes, it can become generational.
Mhm.
So that makes so much sense. We had the pleasure of talking about our books together, I don't know, months ago.
Yeah.
And we were talking about marginalized people and dealing with tough topics. I always try in every one of my novels, I try to lift some social issue up. And you in this one talk about toxic secrets and you talk about addiction. Tell us a little bit about that and why that's so important to you.
I think it's important, and I know we share that. I know we talked about with True Grace, we talked about the very difficult, not just marginalized people, but I think that people, our readers, want to connect with characters and stories. Let's look at it this way. You can buy a self-help nonfiction book about addiction, about generational trauma, about any of the very heavy topics that we write about. And those are great and I'm sure very helpful. But I think it's important because we can put our readers sort of in the narrative. So they're not just reading about an issue, but they're actually reading a story where they can relate to being part of that narrative and in that story. And so in that way, it almost becomes like a coping mechanism. If someone has gone through the same issue or knows someone who has, let's face it, things we write about, our readers, they either, if they haven't gone through it themselves, they know someone who has, or they
Mhm.
know someone in their family or their circle. And so I think it's a way for them to connect, to really connect and not just be reading about an issue, but to be placed in a narrative, in sort of an everyday, navigation of that issue. And I think that helps our readers not just connect with our characters, but also with us.
Yes, yes, they actually get to experience it with,
You do.
our characters are real people.
Mhm.
They're real, live, breathing people.
Just like our
And
readers.
yes, and so they get to experience with us. So tell us a little bit more about Tessa as a person and what are some of her flaws? What are some of her flaws? What are some of her strengths? What do you love about her?
So Tessa is a classic people pleaser. And again, because of a trauma from her childhood, which deals with abandonment, she exhibits many of the characteristics of a person who has dealt with the issue of abandonment, some of which appear to be positive traits, but really are can be a detriment to the person. Tessa is one who doesn't want to step out of line. She wants to please everyone around her. She's very
Mm,
loyal. She has a big family, big Italian American family. She's very loyal to her family. Um, but, as I said, sometimes when you're trying to please everyone around you, the cost is your own happiness and what's best for you, right? And so I would say it's kind of a flaw. Of course, I think, obviously putting everyone ahead of yourself all the time can be considered a flaw. But one of the things I love about Tessa is that she has the wherewithal to sort of, when she realizes, when she sees the situation that she's in her marriage, she keeps a lot of secrets from everyone she knows, including her family, which is very difficult for her. But one of the things I love about her is she gets to a point where she realizes these secrets will destroy her. And we've heard it said, our secrets make us sick. And so what I love about her is that she realizes at a certain point, listen, if I don't pump the brakes here, if I don't deal with this, if I don't make some really hard choices, then I'm going to just pass on this trauma to my own children, and I'm going to drag this along with me, and thereby dragging it along with my children as well. So I think, we often think of coming of age stories as with adolescence, but
yeah.
I think it's really a coming of age story for her, because even though she's, 30-ish, she has to, figure out her path. And so it really is a sort of a coming of age for her. And I like that about her, that she understands and is willing to make very difficult choices in order to improve not only her own life, but the lives of her children moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And when you were saying that she's a people pleaser and that's both flaw but not, often our greatest strengths are also our greatest weaknesses when we overuse them, when we
So
don't use
true.
them with care. So that's a perfect example of that. So one of the things that people always ask me in interviews, and I don't usually ask writers this question, but I'm asked it so many times that I'm going to ask you. So they always ask, are you a pantser? Meaning for our audience, that we don't write outlines, we don't really know where the story is going to go. We kind of have an idea, or a planner. There are lots of writers that do a whole outline and make sure that, their plot points and they know what they're doing. Where are you on that continuum?
It's such a great question. And isn't writing such an individual task? And everyone, there's no right or wrong way. So I would say for the most part, I probably fall in between. And what I mean by that is I don't do an entire outline. And any of my college students, if you're listening to this, you do an outline because you're writing a nonfiction essay that needs to be supported by evidence. Um, but I don't do an entire outline. With A Week of Warm Weather, I knew the story, and I had it pretty well mapped out, but more like journaling and notes and that type of thing. And I actually added a subplot as I was writing. So I didn't have, with part of it that I just kind of threw in there as I was writing. But for the most part, what I really try to do is I try to think of what is my point? Okay, so what is the point of this
Mm,
story?
hmm
And so once I figured that out, I really try to stick to only scenes that go to that point. So I'm
mm.
sure you've written a scene and you think it's so great and it's so has clever dialogue, but in the end, it gets tossed because it really doesn't further the story or prove your point. The other thing I try to think about is who are my readers? What is my reader concerned about? What does he or she care about?
Mm.
What keeps them up at night? And how will my book resonate with them? And then I just sort of go from there. I have sort of I kind of know the beginning and I know the end. And it's the middle, it's those pesky 200 pages in the middle that can really be a problem. But I think for the most part, I'd have to say if I have to choose, I'm probably more of a pantser. And one thing, and I speak to a lot of authors, as I know you do, I only do one draft, which freaks out a lot of writers. I go back and I edit. I think it's the teacher in me. I go back and I edit as I'm writing. And if I take something out, it's gone. I mean, I might, if it's a scene that I think I might use later, or I think, okay, I like this scene, but I put it in too early. I don't want the reader to know this yet. That's different. I'll save that. But I basically just keep editing and working on that one draft because I think if I had, 27 drafts, it would drive me crazy. I think I wouldn't, I think it would just get me too off track. So if I have to pick one or the other, I would say I'm probably a little bit more of a pantser than an outliner.
Yeah. So I'm like you. I do one draft because I edit as I go and I belong to a writing group and I have a writing coach.
Mhm.
And so I just keep going. And my writing coach would say to me, Kathy Giorgio, she would say to me, well, Karen, just keep remembering this is just the first draft and you probably have three or four to go. No, no.
No, no. And
This
and
is
don't
it. This is
and
this is draft one.
this is it. And don't you love when your computer keeps asking you, this already exists. Would you like to replace it? Yes.
Yes. I want to replace it because that's all I'm doing.
Yes.
So what are you working on now or what's ready to be birthed?
So I've just finished in the last few months, I just finished my second novel, which is also, I would call it, I know women's fiction is a sort of a genre that's under scrutiny right now in terms of the name of it, but I would call it, contemporary or literary fiction, realistic fiction. So it's out for submission right now. I'm hoping that somebody will take an interest in it and it'll be out in the world sometime, hopefully next year. But my working title is Painting Over Cracks, and it's about this young couple. And the book opens unfortunately, at a funeral, at the husband's funeral. So they're a young couple who are in this very freak, tragic car accident in which he is killed. And so the protagonist, whose name is Beth, she's got to now start her life completely over. And she's educated, and she has a lot a lot of things that she's good at, a lot of skills, but what she really wants is a family. She wanted
Mm.
a spouse and a family, and so she feels that dream died with her husband in this accident. And so it's about her, sort of going forward and moving on. But in doing that, she starts to learn some things she did not know about her late husband, some mysteries and some secrets. She finds out one thing, which leads her to another thing, which leads her to another thing. And so this one has a little bit more mystery and intrigue than A Week of Warm Weather, but it's still really about a person who just has to figure out how to be true to herself and how to, find herself in all the noise and really just boil it down to that.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. I forgot to ask you, do you have a copy of the cover of your novel? Do you have that around? I should
I
have said that to you. My audience loves to see the books.
I do, if you don't mind if I stand up for a second.
Yes, get it.
It's actually right next to my Billy Joel bobblehead back there. If you can, let me see. There he is. There's my Billy Joel bobblehead. I hope that's not
Isn't
backwards.
that
Is that
gorgeous?
so? Yeah, I really like the cover. And it's one of those things that if you look at it, and even the title itself, it sounds like, oh, A Week of Warm Weather. But if you look a little closer, it's kind of like, wait a minute. I think because it's actually blurry, and there's like holes in it's glass, and there's holes in it. So it sounds like it's, oh, this nice story, but it is. It's a I think a nice story, but it's got some certainly has some issues in there that I think people can resonate with. I try to, treat them with the dignity that those issues deserve and the authenticity that they
Yes.
deserve, so that
Yes.
people can relate, and that the story will resonate with them.
Yeah, and to do it in a non-judgmental way. I
Exactly.
find that one of the things I love about books that are written without the author not judging. So the reader can judge if they want to, but as the
Exactly.
author, I'm presenting this character in their fullness.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting about your clever cover because I did that with True Grace. I had it's a picture of them dressed in the
It's the yes, I have
but the pearls are spilling.
yes.
The pearls are spilling. Not everybody notices that, but then people have asked me and said, "But why is her necklace broken?" Hmm.
I
Hmm.
noticed that when because I always like to look at covers like that. So when I got your book, I noticed, I'm like, yeah, so yes.
What are those beads doing there? Well, thank you so much. This is what are you reading? What are you writing? So can you give us some book recommendations?
I read so many books last year, and there's one that really has stuck with me. Well, I tend to read, well, I do tend to read anything that Ann Tyler writes. She's
Yes.
been my inspiration. I think, even as a very young person, if there was one author who I really thought, gosh, I would love to be able to do this, that her characters are so fleshed out. Um, and it really, her characters drive the whole story, and they're not, she doesn't do a lot of interviews, but I heard little quotes from her saying that a lot of times it's the very small things that are much larger than the very large things, and she does that
Mm,
so well.
mm, mm.
So I read anything by her, but I did read, I'm not sure, I don't know if you did, Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano. She also wrote Dear
Oh,
Edward.
yes. Yes.
And so Hello Beautiful, it just, as I said, I've read so many books in the last year, but this one stuck with me. I think she has said it is an homage to, another very famous literary set of siblings, the March sisters in Little Women, but it's not a retelling of it. There are references, and you see that if you look for it, it's because it's about four sisters. And one of the things that, I mean, this is just a happenstance, but their name is Padavano. My family name is Padavani. So that instantly was like, but it's just a story about love and forgiveness, not just romantic love, but also familial love. And so it's this four very, very close sisters in this Italian family. And then this a man who grew up in an emotionally vacant household, comes into the picture, as a love interest for one of the sisters. And so he's had a very, very troubled past. So here you have this person who's so damaged and broken coming into this family of these four sisters, and how they all, when his tragedy from his past starts to influence all of them. And so it's just a very moving story about, because you don't like all the choices they make, right? And
Hmm.
I really admire that, because in my book, in my first book, A Week of Warm Weather, readers have said they wanted to throttle Tessa. Like, what are you doing? Get out, but it's not that easy, as we know. And so that Hello Beautiful, it has that same sort of, oh, I don't really like what she's doing right now, but I just love this story because it's so real.
It's
So
real and authentic.
I would highly recommend it.
I think that's a beautiful, beautiful book, and I agree with you. It's so funny when you say that about getting mad. I mean, I've gotten mad at my characters myself. I was listening to one of my earlier novels, Reckonings, on Audible while I'm working out, and I'm thinking, "No, Roxy, ooh, choice, danger, danger."
They don't always listen to us, though, do they?
They don't. Well, this has been a delightful conversation, Lee. Tell our audience how they can find you, where they can find out more about you, where they can find your books, what you're doing.
So, as I said, I have my second book out for submission. I'm starting brainstorming. The third one is speaking to me, and so I'm doing a little bit of research and plotting for that. You can find me. I have a website. It's leebukowski.com, which will let you know any current events, or anything I'm doing, or any events, in person or virtual. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. On Facebook, I'm just Lee Bukowski, and on Instagram, Lee Bukowski author. And that's pretty much where people can find me and keep up with me.
So go to her beautiful website. That would be probably the best place to go.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can find her in all the other places, this other social platforms. And I hope that you are already following me. I know you're now going to follow Lee because we so appreciate that. You're going to read her book. You're going to write a review because reviews are so important to us, especially when a book has been out for a little while. Getting a fresh review, getting current review can make a huge difference. So I know you're going to do that for Lee because that's the kind of readers you are. Thank you again. Thank you all. And I'll see you next week. What are you reading? What are you writing? Have a great week, everybody. Bye bye.